According to the official account, 2 infant boys were thrown into a river, saved by a wolf, and eventually went on to found a city. It is a tidy story, complete with a divine bloodline from the god of war and an incredibly precise date, April 21st, 753 BCE. That level of precision should immediately raise questions. The commemorative symbols for this event were struck roughly 500 years after the fact. By the time anyone stamped this narrative onto currency, nobody alive had met anyone whose grandparents had met a witness to the actual founding. This timeline represents Rome's founding, but ancient writers didn't record just one starting date. They recorded at least 60. The historical record holds dozens of competing explanations for where the city came from. In one version, refugees flee Troy and burn their own ships to force a settlement. In another, a Greek witch and the son of Odysseus build the city. If you found 60 conflicting witness statements at a crime scene, your first conclusion wouldn't be the case is solved. It would be that the accounts are embellished, incomplete, or working from flawed information. The sheer volume of these contradictions indicates that we are looking at something other than a factual record of what happened on the ground in the 8th century BCE. To find the actual starting point, we have to set aside the texts and cross-examine the physical evidence. Rome never functioned as a clean, single-day startup. The tidy narrative of its birth was manufactured centuries later, wrapping a much messier, slower reality in a more convenient, hero-driven history. Archaeologists digging near the Roman Forum have uncovered cremation graves that date back to roughly 1000 BCE, centuries before the legendary founding. 2.5 centuries of continuous human burial on this ground proves there was no singular spark of creation from nothing. Life and ritual were already established long before any figure from the legends was supposedly born. Geography provided the true catalyst. The settlement sat right on the Tiber River, intersecting directly with the Via Salaria, literally the Salt Road. In the ancient world, salt was the primary technology available for preserving food through the winter. Controlling the regional salt routes created a permanent economic magnet, pulling in surrounding populations and migrants who needed that resource to survive. Instead of following a divine plan, Rome's growth was driven by basic logistics. It was a slow, multi-generational accumulation of scattered villages, made powerful by a monopolized resource. Yet Roman tradition tells us exactly 7 men ruled the city consecutively over 250 years, personally building all of its core institutions. In any documentation of a real dynasty, that level of mathematical neatness is incredibly rare. Real institutional development is anonymous and spans generations. Look at this data representing the archaeological record. Later writers packed that sprawling progress into tidy silos. The first 4 kings functioned as containers, inventing religion, military, and trade, giving a human face to centuries of change. The historical record gets harder to dismiss when we reach the final 3 kings. They were verifiably real men of Etruscan origin, and their reigns align with large-scale, physically excavated infrastructure projects like the Temple of Jupiter. Finding a sequence of foreign rulers sitting on the throne usually implies a hostile takeover. Since the dominant Etruscan civilization sat right next door, conquest seems like the simplest explanation. However, we have no physical evidence of an invasion, no occupying army in the city, no record of forced tribute, and no narrative of formal surrender. The story of Tarquinius Priscus suggests a different path. He was an ambitious Etruscan with Greek parentage, a mixed background that triggered strict purity laws, blocking his advancement in his hometown. He moved to Rome specifically because it offered opportunity to talented outsiders. Rome grew by actively absorbing Etruscan talent, rather than succumbing to outside force. The city proved that offering a path for upward mobility was a more effective growth strategy than warfare. Compare this to how other ancient powers operated. The Athenians built their civic identity on the belief that their ancestors sprang directly from the native soil itself, an unbroken and uncontaminated bloodline. That strategy operates as a closed system, structurally designed to exclude outsiders and declare that nobody else gets to enter. Now look back at those 60 contradictory origin stories. Whether it features kidnapped Sabine women, fleeing Trojan refugees, or Etruscan migrants taking the throne, they all share a single structural logic. Every variation follows the same pattern. Outsiders arrive, and the city absorbs them into its own culture. Observe how these disparate threads weave together into a singular, forward-moving vector. The conflicting legends weren't literal history. They were a strategic brand identity. Rome outlasted its bloodline-obsessed rivals because its myths sold the strategic advantage of an open door, inviting anyone looking for a fresh start to join their machine.